This thing has sound, so I tried a boing sound. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. I hope you had a peaceful weekend after all this protesting and watching protests and everything. I hope you had a peaceful Sunday, at least, and a peaceful Monday. I personally am very happy to see you here. I already sent our news briefing for today, so if you're not subscribed yet, why? It's free. There is no pay wall or anything like that. So get your actual news right into your mailbox every Monday through Friday. And then Sunday, we have non-political edition, which is a Sunday edition. And this week, we focused on resilience, from marching and standing up for democracy to taking care of your health, immune system, and being resistant, also mentally and psychologically, against all kinds of bullshit that we're facing these days. Hi, Michael. Hello. He says, hi, Sean. Hi, Sean. Sean is here. Happy Monday, gang. Who's ready for some actual factual? I like it. That should be my username, actual factual. Hi, Michael. Hello, Steven. Hello, Monday. Good Monday or good Monday. Hope that weekend went well for everyone both days. Yes. So, and speaking of that and why I'm delayed, because listen, every single time I'm sitting here hitting this button to go live, people start calling and messaging. Today was the message from the city of New York, allowing me or inviting me to cover the debate with potential mayors of New York City, which will happen this Wednesday. And usually it takes weeks for the government to approve accreditation. They're willing to do this overnight. So they're like, okay, ASAP, send this and that. So I think it would be really interesting to cover it. Yes, I am a New Yorker, and this hits home physically and metaphorically. But also, as I always say, circus travels, right? Whether when we talk about economic decisions, when we talk about immigration, when we talk about even any types of harassment or any types of legal action, right? When we say that, well, if it happens somewhere and it is being tolerated or it's not being addressed, right? When those clearly defined lines by law are blurred, then, as I call it, this circus travels, and then you will see it in other locations. And so my, question, and I would love to ask the candidates specifically, of course, Mamdani, who is leading this race by double digits, and former Governor Cuomo. I want to ask their, physically, without, talking about who lacks or who has experience, without even diving into legal cases, which is a story for another day. But when they talk about economy, again, without labeling anything with any type of ism, what is your plan? How do you plan to finance that? Are you aware about the jurisdiction and what is in your toolkit as a mayor? Can you impose tax? Can you do this? Can you do that? Right? Because they're very clear rules. So without that clickbaity narrative that makes things go viral, what is your plan? How do you plan to finance this? And then comment on the plan of your opponent. Why do you think that wouldn't work? Because I think we need to be focusing not just in New York, not just in the United States, but worldwide. We need to come back to basics. We need to start respecting law. And to respect it, we have to start studying it. We have to start understanding what are our rights, what is the jurisdiction, what, again, is in the toolkit of the leaders that we're electing on your local level, regional level, federal level, and what you can expect from them. And then also demand media to hold these people accountable, right? Accountable to fulfill those promises that got them elected in the first place. So this is my point of view, and I think this would be very interesting to, to cover and talk to these candidates, because yes, New York is the global financial capital, at least for now, right? At least for now, it's not Beijing yet. So our decisions will matter for everyone, even if you're watching from Canada. It will matter, really. So for that reason, apologies for delays, but I really would love to cover that. Now, what we did cover this weekend, if you missed that, I really, I understand it was like an almost 6-hour live stream, but check it out if you can spare a click and check out our coverage of the global pro-democracy protests over this weekend. It was on Saturday. I mean, guys, this was massive. Here's a video which I think really depicts the motion and the notion and the vibe of it. Take a look. That what has been happening overnight. And then I see New York Times covering it with one sentence, that a lot of people across the United States marched. It was peaceful. It's like, how dare you? Well, reportedly, those are, 7 million people marched. But if you look at the statistics that I studied today, that in 2025, up to today, right, and the statistics go from 0 to now, beginning from the Trump's inauguration, 12 million people on average are protesting in the United States these days. And now think about it, because our footage and our coverage went really global, and I commend you, and I'm so grateful to our Onest community. Honestly, this day, yes, for us, like as a collective was important, but for Onest Network was important because we showed what people journalism looks like. We had Onest community folks reporting from 48 cities. We had Spain, we had Canada, we had, of course, all across 50 states. And, all across the United States, the protests there were over 2,700 locations. Big, small, medium, of course, as I showed you, was Boston and New York and Chicago. And I mean, New York was estimated 100,000 people protested, Boston 100,000, Chicago 250,000 people, but also in smaller locations. And people stood up really against the ICE operations, about the illegal system that is taking place, and about this, iron curtain that is closing on us, right? And that's very illegal. And you can put a label of ism that is, setting upon us. And this was peaceful. There were no major conflicts in New York. Nobody was detained by NYPD. They were so proud to, comment on that. And it was really people first, people versus power protest. And this deserves extended coverage. And so for that, I want to take time and present, like today, if you look at your news briefing, there you already have a report by our Onest community member, Michelle M. Some people wanted to stay anonymous, semi-anonymous, and I totally support that because of, the regime that is currently taking place. And so this was from Whittier, California. And so I want to show you the pictures that Michelle has submitted. And then every day we're going to review more, because I think it's important for us to understand that we're not alone, that others are also thinking the way we are. And look, release the Epstein files, come back. That's, again, submitted by Michelle M. from California, Veterans Against Trump. This gentleman says, my father killed Nazis. Yeah. And this, so precious, another granny for sanity, patriotic, peaceful protester. And that's the vibe, see? And Trump, there will be hell Tope. Yeah, that's funny. And then, of course, there's a bear who's protesting against ICE. And Trump takes constitutional oath as seriously as wedding vows. See, and there's so much funny and snarky and sarcastic, slogans, but all together, showing up, understanding you're not alone, you're not in Twilight Zone. Others also think like you. So if you miss that, just click and check a couple of minutes at least from our broadcast there. We tuned in to the speeches all across United States there, and I presented the footage as we were receiving it in real time. And once again, thank you to everyone who is part of this, and I'm looking forward to continuing this. And Trump's response were memes, and one of them was thing that I showed you during the coverage, which Vance posted about Trump putting a crown on himself. Look, take a look. Another one, which I will not show you, was, but it went viral on all platforms, deservingly so, for the just bizarre, fundamental basis of this stupid meme, where Trump in the crown is flying a jet, military jet, and dropping extensive amounts of feces, on protesters all across the United States. They show New York. They also show Democratic influencer Harris Sisson and his face there, and he spoke about that. And altogether just bizarre. But then Trump was returning from Mar-a-Lago, where he rushed to after meeting Zelenskyy on Friday. There was a $1 million per plate dinner fundraiser for MAGA Super PAC. And when I asked more about that, sources told me that, well, they're now heavily considering Ivanka Trump as a successor. So Trump 2028 doesn't have to mean Donald Trump or Donald Jr. I'm trying not to think about it, but yeah. In anywho, and so he was then flying on Air Force One back, and he was asked about the protests, and he said, well, they do not represent Americans. They're Soros-sponsored, whatever. And he is not a king, he said, because he, and this is a quote, he works his ass off for America. Okay. But my personal wake-up moment was when somebody liked a tweet that I posted on July 11th, 2024. And this was a tweet that I shared during the time when press poll, specifically New York Times, was digging against Biden at that point, calling him senile, calling him names and all that kind of stuff, and questioning his sanity. And so I want to read out that tweet, and I posted it across social so you can take a look at that. I shared it again on July 11, 2024, and I said, media was talking about the gaffes and all, but actual news for today. And again, this was July 11, 2024, and I'm reading this. New aid for Ukraine. IRS Treasury got $1 billion from millionaires in taxes. Biden administration unveils $2 billion investment to revitalize American auto manufacturing. Biden-Harris administration launches ICE Pact, was icebreakers, nothing with immigration, with Canada and Finland to strengthen polar capabilities. POTUS Biden receives endorsement from world leaders. USAID announces $100 million for Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank. U.S. expects to surpass ambitious tourism goal ahead of schedule, anticipating 91 million visitors by 2026. June Consumer Price Index, good news. But if you like to troll about gaps, you do you. I see you for the actual news. And that tweet just hit me like a snowstorm. I mean, it's 1 year in, and it's less than a year, obviously. It was Trump in office, and every single point that I mentioned has been reverse, remove, destroyed. I think that's the notion of everything that happens. But another news, a new week begins with no end in sight for government shutdown, 20th day. There's a bit of standoff over healthcare subsidies as senators prepare to return to Washington. And I put it in the newsletter today that about 2 million people will not be able to afford healthcare because of the ACA cuts, and this will begin January 1st. But then altogether, when we talk about subsidies, and when the subsidies, they come from the government, they come from companies, and if these stop, nobody would be able to afford healthcare. Very serious conversation. But also what is even though serious, the federal agency responsible for modernizing the U.S. nuclear stockpile will furlough the majority of its staff today, and probably it already happened, according to Department of Energy and their memo. Roughly 1,400 employees at the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, will receive furlough notices, with fewer than 400 remaining on duty to safeguard the arsenal. And of course, administration said that there is no national security threat at this point, but I mean, seeing is believing. And again, this is all very much prioritized. At the same time, we're hearing that the government, during this shutdown, has spent $172 million buying 2 private jets for Secretary Noem and DHS. They also keep workers who will be baby drill in Alaska, who participate in that action. They also pay ICE. So priorities are there. And then they take the food stamp money and they paid military with that food stamp money, but then they claim that there is a computer glitch that nothing can be paid out to the families of those who died in combat, so military families, right, or those who came back from being deployed and are incapable of working. And so the tuition for their kids is not being paid. Essentially their support has been cut off because they say there is a computer glitch, right? But then again, we're buying private jets for DHS. Something really interesting happened with Baltics, right? They are preparing for an imminent invasion by Russia, but also Poland, and we know that their Polish president is sort of right wing, of course, and he's pro-Trump and very much sort of not anti-Ukraine, but not very truly pro-Ukraine. He's pro-Poland, but also right wing. And meanwhile, their foreign minister, Donald Tusk, is very much pro-Ukraine and is, a voice of reason, so to speak. But what had happened over the weekend, and actually this morning, that the presidents of Poland and Lithuania met at their shared border to officially open a key section of the Via Baltica highway. And this is the only road that is connecting Poland with Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The new route will play a crucial role in regional security, defense, and economic development. And I do have the visual for it.
Activate the connection of Via Baltica.
So, right wing, left wing, whatever, but when you anticipate aggression from a neighbor that is being very much aggressive for over 10 years against another neighbor, then you start taking those threats seriously, and that sort of unites people, as we see. Of course, a big situation happened at Louvre yesterday in Paris. Of course, the museum was evacuated and closed yesterday because of the bold daylight robbery that happened there. And it's, of course, it's being investigated. First of all, it all took 7 minutes. It was highly organized. No injuries reported. They cut out a piece of glass in the window and escaped. Left the biggest jewelry piece, the 140 carat Regent diamond, untouched. Also other jewelry untouched, but they stole some things from the jewelry that linked to Napoleon and Josephine. And then somehow a broken crown was from the Empress Eugenie, was found around the corner. And the questions were, is it mistake, diversion, or some type of message, right? And I do connect it to, and I think indirectly, to the whole China, BlackRock and stuff situation. So if you were part of our Friday deep dive, you probably can connect some dots and take a look there. But we don't know. Maybe those were robbed, or just, some type of normal robbery. But where are you going to go with those things? Are you going to sell them? Do you think nobody will recognize? Like, so it has more to it, I believe, but we'll see, right? No conspiracy theories here. Now, as to Ukraine, right? A lot has been reported through multiple sources, my sources and official reports, about what went down between Zelensky and Trump at the Oval Office when they met on Friday. And so, based on all the sources, essentially Witkoff and Trump pushed Zelensky to give up Donbass region. And Donbass region is not just Donetsk that's under occupation, but it's also entire Lugansk region or Luhansk region in Ukraine, and which Putin struggles to occupy and control since 2014. But because, per Witkoff, they Russia claims the Russian speakers are there, and I'm a Russian speaker from Ukraine, and guess what I think about Putin? He claims, well, that should be a referendum, and there was a referendum or whatever, and that this should belong to Russia. And so, according to again multiple sources, uh, Trump has been cursing Zelensky out. Zelensky brought in maps showing the red lines and essentially asking for tomahawks and showing what will be the military target that are legitimate to hit inside Russia, so they feel the impact of this. And especially with winter month being very cold, and then the grid being very overpowered in Ukraine and affected altogether. And Trump was, kind of throwing the maps all around, screaming at Zelensky. Zelensky was screaming back, and all this. And then again, when Trump was flying from Mar-a-Lago on Air Force One yesterday, he claimed that no, it was very cordial. Nobody was screaming. I didn't push him to do anything. It was everything, peaceful. Doves, cakes, and roses. But again, based on variety of sources, Ukrainian, American, other European sources, everybody confirms that in fact this was that. And then what I want to read out to you is that Zelensky spoke to media yesterday in Kiev. It was in Ukrainian, but translated, he explained exactly what did happen. And this is his quote. "The position of the Russians hasn't changed," says Zelensky. "They want us to withdraw from Donbass, not the entire east, but specifically Donbass, that is completely from Donetsk and Luhansk regions. I made it clear that Ukraine's stance in this context remains unchanged. I explained this both to Trump and Witkoff. We understand that Mr. Witkoff is simply conveying what Russia means. This does not necessarily reflect his own view, at least according to him. I made it clear to him that there are some misleading impressions. The story is that the Russians claim they supposedly held a referendum among the Russian people in Donbass, and that they supposedly want to join Russia. But first there was the occupation, and only afterward did something uncontrolled and clearly illegal happen, with which they called a referendum. Moreover, I would say that these signals from the Russians are so far from reality that 10 years passed between the start of the occupation and the so-called referendum. Do you see where it doesn't add up? Mr. Witkoff points out that it was incorporated into their, meaning Russian, constitution. So I explained to Mr. Witkoff once again that if tomorrow Putin adds something else to their constitution, after the war ends in one way or another, will we need to withdraw from some territory again? And if, for example, I amend the constitution of Ukraine to include 2 regions of Russian Federation, would they then leave those territories? This is a non-functional model. End quote. And that's, we speak English. Shall Britain just claim us, or Mexico claim our southern states that have a population that speaks Spanish? Or maybe we should just belong to somebody else. Like what is this, right? And if we go by Russian constitution, what if they add Alaska to their constitution? Is Witkoff going to volunteer to surrender Alaska? Which nothing will obviously surprised me at this point. And then Carolyn Levitt went on programs yesterday, and on Fox News she declared that not just Trump is very tired with the conflict in Ukraine, but altogether the American population. But then, if you actually dig, 73% of Republicans and 72% of Democrats support supplies and for Ukraine and tougher sanctions on Russia. So it's very important to also check some facts. Right. Same story as when I shared earlier this morning, where the White House sent out this memo, this sort of like a press release, that because of Trump, the gas prices are below $3 in 12 or 13 states. And it's because he cares so much about our economy. But then they quote this article from Gas Buddy. And if you look into that article, as an explanation, they there offer that the OPEC Plus group has been dumping so much oil, essentially overflooding the market, and China has been buying a lot of oil to sort of enrich their own resources and stockpiles. And the big question is how long they will continue to do so. But altogether, with that cheap oil, what OPEC Plus group does is essentially getting bigger market share and pushing United States from our positions prior. So if we think about what is Trump actually doing, it's not that smart. And it's always important to consume factual information, right? But according to Wall Street Journal, Trump believes another face-to-face summit with Putin could lead to breakthrough. Secretary of State Rubio spoke today to Lavrov. He's going to meet Lavrov, horseface, on Thursday. And but altogether, Trump is continuing to have more pressure, exercise more pressure on Zelenskyy than Putin. So much so that Trump actually, and this is now according to Reuters, and again, sources in addition to Reuters, because I couldn't believe it, but Trump is suggesting security guarantees for Russia. I'll let you marinate on that. First, no NATO expansion for Ukraine, demilitarization and neutrality of Ukraine, that they will be giving up the weapons they created and have, and recognition of current front lines, so giving Russia everything that they got and more without any consequences by ICC or anybody else. And again, Trump would be guaranteeing no consequences for his best friend, warmonger Putin. Now, Trump told Zelenskyy that he has no plans to supply Tomahawk missiles and emphasized diplomacy over escalation, seeking to freeze the front lines. In a pre-recorded Fox News interview, though, that was pre-recorded before Trump spoke to Putin and met Zelenskyy, he says that there will be no Tomahawks and that Ukraine has to surrender territory. So you see it for the theater that it, in fact, became. And altogether, then, CNN also reported that Trump misrepresents the intention of Ukraine. He says that Ukraine is trying to escalate the war, but Ukraine is a victim. I mean, how many more of these things are we going to, it's time we're going to spend here just mentioning the obvious. And then Caroline Leavitt was tweeting, we had this weird conversation, right, on Friday, where a Huffington Post reporter and White House press pool member, SV Date, asked her who suggested Hungary as a place for meeting. And she got very pissed. She said, your mama, and all that story. And then she sort of started dragging him through the mud on social media. She posted this earlier today, calling him not a journalist, but a left-wing, some type of political activist of some sort. And then she herself posted this exchange where here's the question that he sent her: is the president aware of the significance of Budapest? In 1994, Russia promised in Budapest not to invade Ukraine. It gave up the nuclear weapons if it inherited when the Soviet Union dissolved. So pretty much, as we did, is just stating the obvious. Does he not see, referring to Trump, why Ukraine might object to that site? Who suggested Budapest? And then she says, your mama did. And he asks, is this funny to you? And she says, it's funny to me that you actually consider yourself a journalist, or journal, as she says. You are the far left hack who nobody takes seriously, including your colleagues. They just don't tell you. I mean, what can I tell you? It's just disgusting. Good news though. Remember, they found a Ukrainian who allegedly was digging holes in the Nord Stream pipe, right? That disturbed Russian um, gas, right? In there, the sale of gas, essentially. And so he is currently detained in Poland, and Germany demanded him to be, sent out to Germany so he could be prosecuted there. But the Poland, did not allow for that, and essentially Polish judge ruled yesterday. And so he said that even if Ukraine destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline, it would not be a crime but a just military operation. The court denied Germany's extradition request for Volodymyr Zhuravlyov, citing insufficient evidence. And so the judge, in a lengthy speech, and I listened to it, it was in Ukraine, well, it was in Polish and translated to Ukrainian, and it was all over Ukrainian news, that he said, look, these countries are at war, and they are, if anything, their intelligence is, yes, attacking a very specific military target, because that is, going to hurt Russia that has invaded Ukraine 10 years, more than 10 years ago. So in that case was a good situation. Now, over the weekend, Trump started fighting with the president of Colombia. Colombian President Gustavo Petro accused U.S. government officials of committing murder and violating Colombia's sovereignty in territorial waters. He's talked about the killed fisherman Alejandro Carranza, who had no ties to the drug cartel, per president of Colombia. His only activity was fishing. His boat was adrift with distress signal raised due to an engine failure when it was struck. And then in response, Trump tweeted calling Gustavo Petro of Colombia, and he spelled Colombia C-O-L-U, not Colombia, but Columbia, like referring to a university in New York. But altogether, he's calling him a legal drug leader, who's strongly encouraging the massive production of drugs, big and small fields over Colombia. But long story short, though, this benefits Putin. Why? Because same as with Venezuela, right? When Trump was attacking Maduro, I understand Maduro is a dictator, I get it, but it all resulted in Maduro closing an unconditional cooperation deal with Putin for the next 10 years. Now with Colombia, same story. We're pushing Colombia in the hands of the BRICS. Colombia is already part of BRICS-led New Development Bank. It's not part of BRICS. The C in BRICS is China, but it's part of BRICS-led New Development Bank. And so altogether, this just will allow Putin to play this mediator and consolidate influence over South America. Now, as to Middle East, remember that the newly elected at this point leader, al-Shara of Syria, was visiting Moscow. And after that, Putin, sort of spoke about this big achievement that, Syria and Russia, are together forever, and Russia is always prioritizing the interest of Syrian people, especially when Assad was, killing them with chemical weapons, I guess. But altogether, then Putin and Kremlin altogether announced that, yes, they will be pursuing this close ties. And of course, Russia is interested in maintaining their air bases and the Navy base, right? So air base and Navy base, which they lost control of throughout this takeover by al-Shara and his crew. But when al-Shara came back, their foreign minister, again newly elected, mentioned that no, there are no ties to Russia at this point. All the agreements under Assad are put aside and are deactivated. And yes, they have discussed about extradition of Assad back to Syria so he could be prosecuted and publicly probably hung or whatever. But at this point, no, the bases are not belonging to Russia, and this is all subject for discussion. So not so good for Putin. But as to Middle East, essentially ceasefire has collapsed over the weekend. Yes, it restarted last night. Both sides have blamed each other for violating the ceasefire. Hamas was shooting. Then Israel started literally flattening Gaza and bombing them all day yesterday. And then today, the Chippendale, Kushner and Witkoff arrived in Israel. preparing sort of the field to welcome J.D. Vance, from all the people, who's supposed to bring the stage 2, which is still unknown to us. What the hell is that? Is it Trump Gaza? Who knows? Into this conversation or whatever by end of this week. So J.D. Vance is expected to be in Israel later this week. And J.D. Vance said that, look, well, in best case scenario, and here's a quote, the best chance for Trump's thing is the best chance for sustainable peace. He also reiterated that Hamas must be disarmed, potentially requiring international forces, including from Gulf states, to deploy to Gaza. But then he spoke that, well, and we always will have to expect some type of fire. Coming from J.D. Vance, who has struggles with buying donuts peacefully. But altogether, Hamas attacked, they launched a response to an alleged Hamas attack, right? Israel did, that killed 2 Israeli soldiers, and then Israeli soldiers killed 44 people across Gaza, according to hospital data, and then both sides accused each other of violating the truce. And then allegedly, again, last night, Sunday evening, the ceasefire again resumed, and then today Witkoff and Kushner are there. Obviously, nobody's going to kill each other while they're there, so we'll see. I guesstimate Trump Gaza coming up next. Now, as to cybersecurity, China is accusing U.S., essentially our NSA, for a cyber attack campaign. For conducting a long-term cyber attack campaign, according again to China, that allegedly U.S. has hacked their National Time Service Center, that institution underpinning communications networks, financial systems, power grids, and global time standards. Again, we don't really have much to discuss there. But today, Trump was meeting Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia. They talked about some type of agreement for, critical minerals. I learned based on whatever lessons we learned from this shit show with Middle East and their peace plan that really was nothing, just bogus. And I published that document. I will not be discussing any documents, any deals, nothing until I have a document. I publish it. I read it out to you. You read it out, and then we analyze it. Okay, let's make the deal, because I don't want to talk about any documents I haven't seen, because there's so much bullshit, because we're just wasting time and we're promoting some type of administration that has absolutely no idea what the hell they're doing. So once we get it, we'll discuss it. As for now, we don't have it. So, but the press, again, with this apprentice setup that is very common these days at the White House, where Trump is at the table. You don't see his ankles, you don't see his hands, but the media is talking to him, and he's exactly in the position where he was screaming, "You're fired," on The Apprentice. So he was asked about Taiwan, point blank, by Australian journalists, whom he then later called nasty. And it was a guy, so he could stay, because we respect guys in this environment, apparently. And he was asked, did China offer you trade deals for you in return to withdraw your help for Taiwan or support for Taiwan? And Trump said, I don't want to talk about that, which is a giveaway, kind of. We'll see. But then when they talked about the tariffs and all, he said, well, we have a very powerful weapon. It's tariffs. I'm going to attack them with planes and plane parts, which again, translated into human English, it's obviously we have Boeing. We have other companies that were in the Western part of the world that China purchases from. And that's where he can limit their purchases, right? From parts, of course, in the airplanes. That's what he meant there. But he conveniently did not mention the new rule that Beijing has passed, that Beijing has to essentially okay every single sale of chips that are either produced using the Chinese methods or minerals that are sourced from China, regardless if they're produced in Taiwan or South Korea, which will knock us out. And we had the deep dive and case study on that on Onest Plus on Friday. So if you don't mind, please check it out, subscribe, and join us on Fridays. And then end of this month on Friday, we're going to meet on Zoom. This is for all Onest Plus, all levels of subscribers. And I will invite everybody who submitted footage from No Kings protests. And we're going to talk about what's next, right? Our experience, our feelings. And so also what are we going to do next? And I'll ask you also what you prefer in terms of coverage. But meanwhile, still talking about China. China is testing, as you see here, a new large unmanned stealth bomber. It's a drone. It's likely GJX-UCAV with a reported 42-meter wingspan. And they've been flying this for days. They're testing this. So it's allegedly not in mass production yet, but coming very close to that. So I'm going to report on 3 quick national news, and then I refer you to our news briefing because I got to run. Quick national news: federal employees tasked with expanding fossil fuel production are cutting green energy remain on the job, even as more than 700,000 federal workers are furloughed during the shutdown. Also, 42 million Americans could lose food stamp benefits next month as the funding has run out on the 18th of October. Nothing has been replaced. Then the September CPI report will be released on Friday because it's delayed due to shutdown. Then in the news briefing, you can read again more quick global news, more about Obamacare and where we go from there. Also, our new strikes in the Caribbean, Afghanistan-Pakistan border ceasefire, global climate policy setback, Zimbabwe elections, U.S.-China trade demands, and Kenya mourning their opposition leader, and former President Barack Obama delivering a speech or commenting on that. All right? Okay. I talked very fast and I didn't check any comments. Let's do it real quick. Hi, Ignacio. Hope you're feeling better. Chip and Dale. Yes. Chip and Dale. They were on 60 Minutes today. Did you see the new version of CBS, the right-wing CBS? It's the Chip and Dale, seated, spread out with the ties. They were talking about how they brought ceasefire, how they brought peace to the Middle East. Meanwhile, like Israel is like flattening Gaza. It's like, what is that, CBS? But anyway, Chip and Dale were on CBS today. Total tale regarding Taiwan because Trump always talks, right? Just Lindy. Yeah, absolutely. Because when he doesn't want to talk, that's I think that says more than when he blabbers nonstop. Yes, and leave it, feeling her Cheerios. Yeah, indeed. Okay, thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Lindy. Irene is here. Yes, Irene says Levitt is still the elementary school bully. Exactly. Thank you guys for being members of Onest Plus. I so appreciate you. Okay, I'm going to run to do this thing with the mayor or whatever for Wednesday so we can ask them some questions. Hopefully it works. Okay. Before I leave, I'm going to show you a cute video of Pope. I mean, I'm not Catholic. I'm obviously Christian Orthodox, but this Pope, I like him. Look at him catching the plushie. It was like a Pope plushie that he first asked to throw at him. And he caught it with one hand with the clip that went viral. So to finish up on a funny note, take a look. Cute. Okay, and I have a longer speech from him, but I'm going to show you that tomorrow. Tomorrow we have unlimited time to be together here. So if you want to ask questions, prepare them. Okay, have a peaceful night. Keep your head on a swivel. Consume factual news. Shut down BS information because we get so much of it. It's like everywhere. So yeah, everything in moderation. So see you tomorrow. Have a peaceful night, and please read the news briefing because it has much more news than I presented here.